Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of What's on Your Shelf. I'm your host, Mulure Mike, and as always, this is the place we travel through literature. And interestingly enough, this month of March, as people are journeying towards celebrating women from 8th of March, International Women's Day, I've been fortunate enough to host ladies through this month of March. And today, our guest, another lady, is going to bring us to her world of literature and is going to introduce us to whatever it is that has shaped her thoughts. And according to her, books have given her life. Books have given her joy. It's her peace. It's her hideout. Who am I talking about? Ladies and gentlemen, on What's on Your Shelf today, we have Patience.
Thank you, Mike. Well, Patience is a reader. I guess that's because we're here. I might just as well say I'm a reader. I'm a teacher as well, a teacher of English and literature. Yeah, I've met different versions of myself in books. I've gotten to know who I am through books. I think I'm quite an introverted person. I had a bit of some traumatic events during my childhood, and books were my best friend. They took me through that period. Happiness to me is just being content with life. Just waking up and being grateful for what I have, feeling content, that's brought me quite a lot of happiness. I was in Sudan and there was that war, which for a long period after the war, I never spoke about it. In fact, I just came back, went on with life, got another job. I never gave myself time to heal from them. Sudan just did quite a lot for me, made me realize I'm courageous, made me realize being happy is possible. Like that dark hole that I've always been for most of my life is not a place I belong in.
Well, how would you define your relationship with your parents? What would you say they gave you or you picked from them that you walk with while traversing the streets and the ups and downs of the city?
One thing that I got from my parents that I'm always grateful for and I keep telling them is teaching me about God. Yeah, and this is not a religious conversation or spiritual one, but the fact that they instilled in me a love for God and just to let me know that there's an existence of a higher being, it's kept me safe for years. And just, I love that I have something to believe in. Yeah.
Do you think that sometimes the society underestimates God?
At some point in any human being's life, whether Christian, Muslim, pagan, they get to a point in life where they want a connection with that higher being. It's just a thing that's in us human beings. And for some, it might be on their deathbed. On some, it might be midlife crisis that makes you want to connect with God more. Society now, because, the Bible, which is God's holy book, has certain rules. And as a society, when you look at it, it feels like it's too difficult to follow this, or, why do I need to do this or do that? It feels like it confines us so much. And so society will sort of object the Bible and say, you know what, let's do away with this book. I won't follow it like word for word, but I'm going to believe in God. And some just decide, okay, I'm not going to believe in all of this. This is too much. Let me just live my life as it is. But I always believe that if I believe in God, then I'm going to believe in his book. I look at the Bible as a manual where, say, if you buy a phone for the first time, you've never owned one, or maybe a radio, the small radios we used to have long ago, and they give you a manual. This is how you set it up. This is how you work it. If I've never touched a radio before and I decide to throw this manual away, I wouldn't know how to set it up. It's like I'm telling the maker, I don't need your manual. I'm going to figure it out myself. Most likely, you might not. You might end up ruining something. Well, if you're a genius, you might. But I feel like the Bible is that manual. God is telling us, this here is a book I'm giving you. I've created you. I've put you on earth. This here is something to guide you. And if I decide to throw that away, then what is my life going to be?
Yeah. All right. And if you're joining us right now, this is What's on Your Shelf with me, Mulure Mike, and I'm hosting Patience, who is a teacher by profession, English literature. And we're going to talk about that at some point. So today we are having this conversation at the Kenyan National Library Service facility at Upper Hill. And this is the Maktaba Kuu. This is where the headquarters for the Kenya National Library Service is. And I want to talk to you guys about something before we get into this conversation. I've happened here to hold, I found this thing in one of the shelves down there. And this is the Kenya National Bibliography. This was the very first edition that was published in 1980. Why am I talking about the bibliography? As a requirement by law, the Kenya National Library Service are the custodians of Kenya's literary works. And every author, every thing written about Kenya or written and published in Kenya, you're supposed to submit 2 copies of that material to the Kenya National Library Service. And that's why each and every time we've said that to all authors, when you publish books, please deposit 2 copies of your books at the Kenya National Library Service. And I think there is a whole conversation on that people have been asking why and how. But I don't want to get into that for now. I want to say that today, this book is published annually, and they do a list of all the books that have been submitted to the Kenya National Library Service in that particular year. So, for example, for this year in 1980, I can see an article here from this Sunday Standard, November 19. There are even newspaper articles, and they have a lot of categories of how they've categorized the books. And I feel like as an author, it is very important that you deposit your 2 copies of the books at the Kenya National Library Service. All that, I'm sure there is a lot of conversation that people, and I cannot also belittle the concerns that most authors have, but I feel like this is a good thing for the publishing industry to have somewhere where, if anyone wanted to know all the books that were published in Kenya in 2025, I can go to the Kenya National Library Service, pick the bibliography. I'm sure by the beginning of next year, there will be one for the books that were published this year that somebody can be able to access. This helps you, and this helps for posterity purposes. Back to our conversation. Today, we're seated with Patience, who is a teacher by profession and a high school teacher, and is gonna take us through a journey of her shelf. She has read, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you this. Patience. Now let me ask you the big question. What's on your shelf?
Well, what's on this shelf?
Yes.
Because
what's on this section of your shelf? But
Yeah.
by the way, Patience has made it very clear. Because we were hosting this, we just carried a few of her books because a majority of her books are in her home. And she'll talk about some of them, and a majority, some of which she's carried here. We'll have an opportunity to take a journey through this mini shelf of hers. But Patience.
Yeah, so in this mini shelf, we have here at the bottom Khalid Hosseini, whom I love. This is my least favorite book of his, but I love some of his other works. Some of these books I bought quite randomly. This one here, Closure, is by Betty Kilonzo. She is a Kenyan that I randomly met, decided to buy her book, went to her event, and that is one of the books that got me to attending more Kenyan bookish events. These here are books that I've enjoyed recently. To Kill a Mockingbird, one of the classics. There's John Green here, who I've read, I think, almost all of his books. These here are Kenyan authors. Some that I have read, some that I'm trying to get into. I'm participating in this thing called the Kenyan Readathon, something started by a friend of mine. It's the 6th year now. Her name is Lexa Lubanga. So we are doing a Kenyan Readathon where we'll be reading Kenyan books from March to September. So this here is a collection of the ones I'll be reading. And then up here is a variety of collections. So yeah, this one I read for my first book club. Up here, a couple of classics. My library, even the one at home, I think 90% of it is classic books. So I'm a big lover of classics. Yeah. And then up there is Stephen King, who has been one of my favorite authors since I was a teenager. I think I liked to horrify myself as a young girl. Yeah. And it made me happy to just tell people horror stories. So Stephen King is that guy for me.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
How would you define your teen years? How were your teen years?
I think they were the best times of my life, to be honest. If I was told to go back to a certain period of my life, I'd go back to being 16. I think I'd pick 16. My teenhood was mostly about just me reading, and those are my favorite memories. I would stay up all night reading books. And one of my favorite parts, actually, we moved to a place. I lived in Kisumu with my mom. So there's a place where we used to live at, and someone created a library just like a few meters away from our house. Actually, if you walk out of the door of our house, just next there was the library, and I'd spend most of my time there. I remember one time my mom getting up to go to work, and she's like, "You haven't slept." And I was like, "But it's not time yet." And she opened the windows and she said, "The sun's up, I'm going to work." And I realized I'd stayed up all night reading. And yeah, I still do even these days. I still stay up all night reading. I've done that severally, even last month. So yeah, my teenhood is the best time of my life. Wish I could go back.
What spiced it up? What would you say spiced it up?
The reading,
The teenhood.
the books, the stories. I was living in a world different from this. I would just be in a world of stories. It could be Stephen King, it could be Goosebumps, it could be Enid Blyton. There's this Magic Tree House, the ones I would read when I was slightly younger. But I was always in this sort of magical world all the time, and I'd have friends in books. Considering I think I'm quite an introverted person, so having those friendships in books and just having book characters that I think about all day just made it a lot more spicy. I don't recall much of my friendships in my teenhood. There's just one particular friend I had as a teenager, and that would explain my entire friendship, I guess. He and I would sometimes he just come home, say hi to my mom. We would sit in silence for 2 hours and just read books and then say goodbye, not talk much. So even my friendships then would be with people who love reading, and we'd sit quietly and read, and it felt like that's the best friendship I've ever had, even without conversations. It was just books, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that led you to being a teacher?
What led me to being a teacher is my father. And my father said he might come up so many times here. My father is a retired teacher, and I always just loved seeing him in his element, being a teacher. And then from him, I realized, I actually love also explaining things to people sometimes and all that. And I wanted, I sort of, part of it came from wanting to impress him. He was that, that guy that set a standard, and I always wanted to be like him. Everything is, I want to do this like my father and this like my father. And he lovingly tells me like I'm the female version of him, which makes me really happy actually. So yeah, my being a teacher, I think my father greatly influenced that. Yeah.
What is this standout characteristic in him that you so admire?
My father loves life. Anyone who's interacted with him would tell you, you sit in his company and you just want to keep talking to him. And I'm not saying that because he's my father. He really is just someone that everyone loves. He is a very sarcastic person, which I am too. Anyone who knows me will tell you that. I try to be nice these days. And sometimes, it used to baffle me that why would people sit with this man? He's very mean sometimes, with his sarcasm. He doesn't do it to hurt. That's just him. But when you sit with him, you'll realize there's just something about him which I can't explain. And I hear my grandfather was the same. There was just that thing in him, which explains why both of them are polygamous. Women love them.
Yeah. Okay. So, how did you find yourself in this whole book ecosystem? You've spoken about your dad being a teacher. You've spoken about your mom, who was also kind and patient with you. but it's not always a guarantee that that will lead you to books. What led you to books?
Now, my earliest recollections about books, again, as I said, my memory is not the best, but I remember reading even as a young child. And quite recently, I was asking my father about it because I wanted to find out why, how did I end up here? How did I, of all your daughters, which my sisters read as well, but not as extensively as I do. And I was asking my father because some of my memories are when he'd visit, because my mom worked a bit far, so my father would come and visit. When he'd visit and he went out with my sisters and I, we had three girls. When we went out, the three of us, he'd take us to a restaurant or something else. But if he went out with just me, he'd always go to a library or a bookshop. And so I wondered why this singling me out. Whenever it was books, it was me and not with my sisters. Or I remember a very vivid memory of one time we went to the supermarket, all of us, the entire family. My mother and two sisters went to the food section and they were looking for what we were going to eat and all that. And my dad and I went to the book section. And I found it quite interesting that even at a young age, I just always remember my father buying me books. Why me? So I asked him, and he said, when we were really young, I went to school in Kakamega. They used to ask the parents to buy 3 books for their kids before, starting a certain class. And he says every time he'd get me those books, I would always just be on the books all the time, just reading and reading. And he saw that, oh, she actually loves books. And as I grew older, he'd always speak to me about books. And not just me, but all of us. And anytime he started talking about books and he'd go into the themes of this book and all that, my sisters would zone out. Sometimes they'd go do some other thing, but I'd stay there and listen. And he remembers mentioning Richard Wright, the author of the Native Son. Yeah. And so he says, one time I mentioned Richard Wright and I told you a book that he's wrote. And the next day you came to me and told me, oh, this other book is also written. And every time I mentioned something in literature, he'd always go find out more information and come back and tell me. So then he realized this one, yes, she loves reading like the rest, but it's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've also mentioned books as a source of comfort and joy. Maybe would you mind sharing with us, is there a season where I would say books journeyed with you through a difficult season or something?
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, I had a bit of some traumatic events during my childhood, and books were my best friend. They took me through that period. And when I grew up, even as a teenager, navigating teenhood, I feel like I navigated my teenhood with books and God. Those are the two things I'd say were there for me a lot of the times. And as an adult in my early 20s, there was a point where I underwent some really bad depressive episodes. And well, this is quite a difficult thing to talk about, but I was suicidal at some point, and books took me through that. And I actually carried something that I like to call my diary, but it's just a ripped up book which has stayed for years, as you can tell.
Yeah.
But there was one entry that would confirm what I just said. If you just allow me to read it, it's
Yes,
quite
please.
a small part.
Yeah.
But it was one of those times where, the suicidal thoughts were cropping up. And then I wrote and said, I thought I held on because of my family, mostly because of my mother, which still is true. But I've just come to realize I'm also holding on because of books, because of all the lovely books that have been written and are waiting for me to read. When all these are gone, will it be worth anything? Will there be a reason to stay? So yeah, I looked back at this entry recently and realized even then, even at that period of my darkness, I held on not just because of my family, but because of books.
Yeah.
And I remember some nights waking up and just seeing my books. And there was one time I actually challenged myself and said, okay, you do this. Just read these books that are on your to be read pile. And if you finish them, and after that you still want out of this life, then go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you got out of it. And today we have an opportunity to sit with you. But maybe allow me to just push it further for somebody maybe who might be in such a situation, who can now maybe look at your footsteps and realize how to get out. and find comfort in your journey out of that season. And now today we have a happier and very enthusiastic Patience, funny enough, called Patience. But now there is always a general assumption that people with both parents and have experienced life have not had a single bit you've spoken about any sad moments at home. How did you end up in this situation? How did you end up so depressed?
Yeah, it was a question that I asked myself as well. I tried to look at it and figure out what exactly led me to this. And if you look at my entries, my diary is very morbid, by the way. I would not recommend anyone to read it.
Please don't.
But yeah, even when I look at some of my entries, there were times when I would ask myself, why do I feel this? And I remember one particular entry where I wrote something along the lines of, I was happy, and I remember that moment actually I was really happy and was listening to music and I was just in this happy mood. And then suddenly I just felt a sort of darkness engulf me. And I sat down and I cried and I took the diary and I wrote something like, please help me, rescue me. I don't know what just happened because I was just happy 1 minute ago and suddenly I feel like I don't want to live. There were moments when I'd walk crossing the road and I would have this strong urge of just getting run down by a car. And then every time that came up, I'd always think of my mother and, the thoughts would go away. But it always surprised me why that would happen. I was fortunate enough to have a friend who is a therapist and I shared these feelings with her. And sometimes she'd see me happy and she would say, before I shared that, she was like, Patience, anytime I see you this happy, I know it's going to be followed by a lot of sadness very in the next few days. And so one time when I shared with her, because at some point it got really bad, I tried to, get out of this life, not something I'm proud to talk about. But when I saw it was that bad, I said, I need to talk to someone about it. So when I spoke to her, and she's the one who actually told me, patients had advised you to seek therapy. What you're describing could be clinical depression. And she explained to me that, and I hated these labels, depression or this or that. I just hated them. I didn't want to identify with any of that. And I've seen friends who've been put on medication because of that. I was like, no, this isn't me. But then I decided to dig deeper, asked my mother about certain things, and I realized it's actually both on my mom's and father's side. There were people suffering from this, but then there were no labels at that time.
Yeah.
So it's probably something genetic because my sister is even worse. She has very severe depression and all that. So, but understanding that it's a medical thing and I shouldn't run away from it was the thing that saved me. And I sought help after that. I realized that this is something that needs help. It's not always that it's got to be triggered by something. Yes, there are the traumatic moments which the therapist also took me through in my life that might have led to me having these feelings. But then again, it's a thing that can just exist. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really I am so glad that you're able to talk about it. This is one of the very difficult topics to talk about because most of the time you don't even know how people will interpret. You don't even know how people will react. But the truth is there are a lot of young people today, and it's even sad that it's even more younger people are going through seasons of depression, and majority don't even know how to get out of it because sometimes people think it is not me. I cannot be going through this thing, because I think for a very long time we were cultured to know that stress that led to depression there are types of people who were privy to that kind of thing. So it also comes with a lot of denial because when you're thinking about it and you're asking yourself, how did I end up here? How am I finding myself here? But I'm just curious to want to know over that season, what is going through your life? What is the stage of life that you are in where you're having these episodes?
Now, that is actually a very interesting thing. And I honestly hope this conversation will help someone. Because sometimes when you think about depression, you think, oh, someone's at a really bad stage in their life and that's why they feel that way. It's funny that mine would come anytime something good would happen. Like I was at a good path in my career. I was living a life that I didn't even imagine I would be living. And I had every reason to be happy. And even in one of my entries, I remember writing, I have every single reason to be happy. I have both of my parents are alive and everything's going well. Why do I feel this? But it was always just there, especially at the times when I should have been happy. That's when I realized this isn't anything that's got to do with events happening in my life. It's something else. It's something that doesn't make sense, because why does it come just when I'm supposed to be happy? And I would look at my life and try to figure out what is this thing that's caused. And most of my friends would be like, "Oh, it's because you're single. You need to find someone." But yeah, that wasn't it either. Yeah,
But did it ever cross your mind that maybe?
maybe the singleness. Yeah, I think because many people were saying that, I thought, yeah, maybe these guys are right. Maybe I need to, find someone and experience love, and maybe it will take this whole thing away. But that wasn't the answer.
How did you get out of it?
Now, I can't say I 100% got out of it, but one thing I'm so sure of, and this actually happened quite recently when I was turning 30, and I called one of my really good friends and I told her, "Man, I'm really scared of this age," because everyone, makes 30 sound like such a big deal. And I was telling her, I don't feel like I've achieved anything, and what's my life and all that. And she said, "Patience, you lived. That's what you've achieved. You are here right now, because the you that I knew even a year ago, I wasn't sure you'd make it out alive. Just the fact that you survived and you're alive, that means more than anything." And the me that was there, let's say even a year ago, 2 years ago, I wasn't happy to wake up in the morning. I have a job that I'm grateful for, but I wasn't, how people are so happy with life and they look forward to the next day. I always dreaded night times. I dreaded sleep. I dreaded being awake. It was all just a cycle of, when does this end? When do I get to just finally rest? But then now, when I sit here and see that I'm attending this podcast and I'm happy with life, and regardless of what it throws at me, I'm just okay. It just means so much. It's been a journey. A lot
Yeah.
of therapy has helped. I believe the Bible has helped a lot. God has been my best friend
Yeah.
throughout my life. I know it sounds cliche these days when people say, "Oh, it's God, it's God." But for me, it really is. Like, I've always felt Him hold my hand. As He says in His word, "I will hold your right hand." Sometimes I feel Him right there when I have these thoughts, and I tell Him, "I don't know why I feel this, but I just need you to hold me like a young child. Take this away from me." And really, he's never left me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is happiness to Patience?
Books. But well, happiness to me is just being content with life, just waking up and being grateful for what I have, feeling content. That's brought me quite a lot of happiness. I feel like there isn't years when I'm not in this, when I wasn't in that darkness, that depression. Things were quite challenging, but I've been happy, genuinely happy. Like, surprisingly, I never knew happiness was a thing that would happen to me, to be honest. That I would sit down and just be like, "Wow, I love life."
Yeah.
I never thought that would happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even when sometimes I go back to my entries, I look at it and I wonder, wow, I've journeyed through all this and I'm here at a point where I'm happy. I'm a happy human being and content, just at peace. That for me is happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that also, in relation to that, I'm very interested to understand this book, Closure. Tell us about Closure.
Closure, well, it's interesting. We were talking about diary entries. That is just Betty Kilonzo's diary entry. Her love story and how she loved this man so much, was heartbroken, and she's just trying to navigate all those emotions. And yeah, at the end of the day, maybe we get closure, maybe we don't. But there's something I think she says quite at the end of the chapter that I sort of liked, about how even if she doesn't have this person, because in the book it's like she wants him back, but then she doesn't get him back. She says, yeah, I think it's here, "You may have been great captain, but she was the sea. My strength is a lighthouse. It will get us home." Not quite the one I was looking for. But yeah, she says something along the lines of, even if I don't have you, I have myself, and that's all that matters. Yeah, for this, it's a book of someone who's heartbroken, trying to find closure. But I think it's not just about, when you read it, it's not just on the angle of being in love and losing the one you love, but in a broader picture, just closure with everything, whether it's family, whether it's love, whether it's with yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that I've started, instead of starting with beginning, I started with closure, but just trying to relate it to what you're talking about, because you're at a happy place today, and I am so proud that you've been able to speak about it confidently, because I'm hoping maybe somebody out there is going through that season. When they hear what you're saying, when they hear how you've navigated and found yourself here, it can be a very good light to light their path. But now, were there things that this going through that season you had to contend with, and especially talking about having gone through therapy, because closure rings that bell in my head where there are things maybe you've contended with in your journey of life, some of which maybe had brought you to that point of feeling some type of way that you've had an opportunity to have closure with.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to talk about some of those things because they are quite personal and some of them quite triggering as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are things that I've gone throughout my life that at some point I think they were holding me back from being who I am. And they were, again, with therapy, I came to realize that some of these things, because I wasn't addressing them, they really were the things that were eating me up. And for some reason, and this is a very bad habit that I have, when I go through something traumatic, I block it. I never talk about it, I just block it and move on with life. And then it manifests in different ways. So I live my life thinking, oh, I haven't gone through that much. Why do I feel this? But it's probably those things that I never address that keep coming up, cropping up in my life. I was in Sudan and there was that war, which for a long period after the war I never spoke about it. In fact, I just came back, went on with life, got another job. I never gave myself time to heal from them, and so it becomes a difficult part
Yeah.
of my life where I don't address things I go through. I just block them and they end up manifesting in very bad ways later on. Yeah.
If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about Khartoum, because you worked there for some time.
Yeah.
How were your experiences in Khartoum?
Oh, my experiences there were pretty good actually. And I know my family and friends, if they hear me say this, they'll probably be really upset. But if I had an opportunity to go back there, I actually would.
Yeah.
The place is lovely. It's really hot. I prefer heat than cold. So for me, it wasn't that big of a deal. The people there were really, really friendly. It was a place where I went there and I remember calling my friend, the therapist I told you about, and I told her, my goodness, for the first time in my life, I feel happy. I don't know what Sudan has done to me, but I'm happy. And she told me, Patience, being happy was always in you. It's not about Sudan, it was always in you. And that's why it's come. Maybe Sudan has just made you see it now, but it's always been there. And I honestly don't know what it was about the place. Maybe it's the thing they say about changing your environment, but it's there that it didn't happen instantly. I remember the first few weeks, I even had a panic attack at some point. I was struggling mentally, and there was this thing I wrote on a piece of paper when I was in Sudan. I wish I had it. That would have been actually interesting for you to hear. But I was in such a dark place, and I remember saying, I'm in this abyss and I don't know how to get out. I feel like I'm drowning, like I'm in a house on fire, and I can't breathe anymore. And I wrote something like, shall I glow in my death? Something like that. And I wondered what it would be to die in a foreign country. Like I was still, even the depression was with me then. And then at some point, it just magically disappeared. I just felt happy. And maybe it wasn't magical now that I think about it.
Yeah.
I started trying to interact with people more. I read Atomic Habits. I'm not one to read self-help books, but Atomic Habits helped me create certain habits in my life that were helping with my mental and physical health. And I think the more I consistently built these habits, the more my life started becoming different. And probably that was where my happiness started coming in, just trying something different whenever I felt this darkness coming in. Because and those who've gone through depression might tell you this, somehow that darkness is addictive. You sit there on your own in your pain. It's hard to want to go out. It's hard to want to see the sun or talk to people. You feel more comfortable just being in that pain. But then here I was challenging myself and telling myself, okay, despite how you feel, I want you to get out. Go out for a walk. Go speak to this person. Go do a workout. And
Yeah.
I would just try, like going against my will of wanting to sit and cry. I would go out. I'd try to do these things, even if it was difficult, even if I hated every minute of it. And somehow I think that really, really helped with my
Yeah.
mental health. Yeah.
Patience, I'm really hearing two things at the same time. I'm hearing happiness and I'm hearing sadness at the same time. And I'm hearing this happens to you in a foreign land. And then anytime I think about Sudan, to be honest, I don't know if I'm addicted to the media, but everything that comes to my mind is war. Everything, anytime, it doesn't matter, it is South Sudan you're talking about or the main Sudan. Every time I hear Sudan, I hear war. So I can't imagine what is Patience going through. It's hot and cold, it's dark, it's happiness, it's foreign land, it's new experiences. Take us through that space in Sudan. Take us through these happy moments. What are these things that are happening in these happy moments? By the way, when you were in Sudan, what took you to Sudan?
I went there. Actually, I'd say I went there for work just as a general response, but it wasn't for work because even the place I went to work at, it wasn't that, oh, it was paying me really well. I was making better money in Kenya, but I wanted to just go. It was again this period of the darkness. I just wanted to be away, just to go anywhere, see if actually changing my environment would work. And my parents, I remember initially, they were so scared because when who wants their kid to go to Sudan? As you've mentioned, we think Sudan, we think it's a war.
Yeah.
And it really is. But when we were going there, especially Khartoum was quite peaceful. I think there were no wars in quite the recent years. There was a cousin of mine who lived there and it was quite peaceful. He studied there. So yeah, eventually I tried to convince them. My father was still really upset. And I remember I told my mom, if my daughter does not come back alive, this is on you guys. Because I'm not giving her the blessing to go away. Yeah, but when I went there was those periods of darkness, there were those moments, but I told myself, I want you to get out of this. Just try as much as you can. This is in your hands now at this point. Even if you don't want to do things, just do them. And I think there's that thing of, novelty of a new place and new people, and you might try to interact with them. So I just try to interact with people, listen to their language, go for walks in the place. Sudan is not like Kenya. I remember when I was in that plane and it was landing, I thought, my goodness, what desert have I just landed into? What is this thing? Like, and and I feel bad about telling my students this, but one of them asked me, oh, Miss, how is Kenya compared to Sudan? And I told them, Sudan would actually be a village somewhere in Kenya. Yeah, it wasn't that awful, but it wasn't a place that I would, willingly say, I want to spend the rest of my life in this place. But the people were so kind. It was genuinely a nice place. I had quite a lot of Kenyan friends there that we worked with. And so we spent most of our time together. It's in Sudan that I got into actually working out, taking better care of my health. I came back to Kenya and relapsed. But in Sudan, and it was the first time in my life I actually got to the lowest weight I ever got to. I was really healthy. Like just so many things were happening that were nice there. Yeah. So by the time the war broke out, that was quite an interesting thing. We were actually in school and I was supervising an exam. And then we had gunshots. I missed the first one. I didn't hear it because again, I'm one of those people that doesn't pay attention to things that don't concern me. And then I saw my students walking to the window, and so I was reprimanding them, get back here, we have an exam going on. And then another shot, and they all got up and went to check, and they were speaking in Arabic, so I didn't get much of it. My first assumption was, is it a wedding? Because in Sudan, when there's weddings, they fire guns, and I think the louder the gun, the richer the person, something of that sort. And then all of a sudden, it became a whole chaotic thing, and everyone was running, and students were being picked up, and gunshots just became more and more. There was at some point one exploded, and we realized, man, this is a war. And we were kept underground in the school for a couple of hours before we had to leave. And as we were leaving, we actually ran because there was still, gunshots everywhere. And we stayed in the house for, I think, at least a week. And there was no electricity, there was no water. The food would obviously go bad because it's a really hot place. We had to survive on dry foods. And I remember at some point, I even wrote that on my WhatsApp status. I wasn't scared. That's the funny thing. I used to go to the window and look when the gunshots were going on at night. It looked like fire. It looks like fireworks. So I'd just go there and watch. And my friends would say, you could easily get shot from that view. And that's when I realized this thing is actually affecting me. And I remember writing on my WhatsApp status one time, there's only two ways to come out of this, either really courageous or really insane. And I'm not sure which one I am at the moment. Because there was a time I'd even crammed at what point those, what do you call them, those planes that fire guns, I'd know which one is a normal plane going and which one is the one going to fire guns because of the sound of it. I'd almost count the second that that bomb is going to fall down. And sometimes they'd go quiet, and that would traumatize me. And I'd tell my friends, what do you guys think they're doing? Like, they're so quiet. Are they, because it was during Ramadan. And I'd think, oh, maybe they're breaking their fast or something. Yeah, I don't need, I'm not supposed to joke about this,
Yeah.
but yeah, the quiet was more scary. And I preferred when they were just shooting. So I know, okay, this is where they are. And when my friends were so scared, I remember even I think I was the youngest in the group. And everyone was so scared to a point that I asked myself, am I supposed to be this scared? Is something wrong with me? Why am I not scared? And I'd avoid calling my mother. So my younger sister, who's really courageous, was the one I'd call, because every time I'd call them, there were the shots going on. And I thought, if my mother hears this in the background, she'd pass out. And so my sister was the one I chose, but I traumatized the poor child. I think she went through so much during that period. So there was a time they would say there's ceasefire, so we'd run somewhere where there's solar, people who use solar and charge our phones for a bit so we can communicate with our families. Eventually we were evacuated, which was a really tough process. Even the journey throughout there. Sudan brought a side of me that I never realized was there. And I remember even the school principal where I was working said, because he knew me from Kenya, said, Patience, I didn't know this was you. I spoke so courageously. It was on so many radio stations. I remember even some of them contacting me. Oh, Patience, we got your number. They sent me airtime to be on air just to speak about the situation in Sudan. It was like, why me out of all these people? I'm the shy one. I'm the one who doesn't speak to anyone. Why me? I was at the forefront of, fighting for us to get home, because there was a few games I think the government was playing with us, keeping us there because it was bringing money for food, which we were not even getting anyway. But I was like, yeah, we're living here and we're going to live now. If you guys don't want to take us out, we're going to walk to Kenya. And if we die on the way, I'm putting this on social media. You explain to our people why you let us die on the way. So yeah, it was quite an interesting time. Got evacuated, got back to Kenya. It's a dreadful experience, but I'll still go back.
So at that place, you're several Kenyans. What is going through your minds in that community? You are the courageous one, or maybe there's something going on that you have a rhythm going on. But were there other Kenyans? Was there any report maybe on how or where this whole conversation or that situation was headed to?
There were many Kenyans actually, and the saddest thing, that's what actually got me to be courageous, was that nearly every nationality had been evacuated, including Uganda. And then Kenyans were the only ones left, and we were taken to this place where I think most of the Kenyan representatives would stay. And other people would see us, like now the Sudanese people who were staying around there, because it was Khartoum, it was mostly the Arabs. They'd see any African person and they'd say, "Hi, Kenya," because they know, oh, it's only Kenyans who are left in this place, because everyone else had gone. And I wondered, where is our government? And I remember, can't remember his name, which is sad. I told you I'm not good with politics and the politician's name. But when the war just started, he'd come with this plane and there were news and they said, whatever happens, we are ready to evacuate our people. Kenya was the first country to speak and say they acknowledge there's a war in Sudan and they are very ready to evacuate the number of Kenyans that are there. And we were almost the last people to leave the country at that time. And I just felt like our government is failing us. What if we actually die in this place? Because, the food was running out. Everything was just becoming more chaotic. We got to a point where we were so scared. And so I just decided, you know what, I'm taking this on social media and I'm going to shout until they hear us, until they let us out of this place. And so I did just that.
Who was the first to respond to your post? Or what did that post do to you and the community that was now around you at that time?
Now, there's this guy, and my goodness, it's quite unfortunate that I forget his name. I told you I'm very bad with names. Quite ironic that I'm a teacher. But I was working, I think, with a radio station, which, again, I can't remember the name. But when we started all these cries, and it was going to so many radio stations, and NTV News was showing, and there were some students who were in Khartoum who decided to self-fund themselves and start the journey. And when they got to, what place did they get to? I think they used the Southern Sudan route. The Kenyan government met them halfway and put it on social media. Oh, see, we are evacuating our people, we are rescuing them. You met these guys halfway. They used their money to get out of this place, and you say you're evacuating them. Like you didn't. So, they're taking the credit for what they had not done. I, on the other hand, I had a family that was ready to take me out of there instantly. I had friends. I have quite a lot of friends in the UK. When they heard of the situation, they were like, Patience, we are wiring you money right now. We need you to be out of there. My cousin who is in the US was like, Patience, how many people are on your team? I'm paying for whatever method you guys want to use. I need you out of there. And this is how I realized I was courageous. I said, I'm not leaving anyone behind. I'm living with all these Kenyans. It doesn't matter. And I put on hold anyone who was trying to pay for me. I said, I'm going with my people. And so I will have to wait until our government asks. And I will shout and scream until they actually act. So yeah, I shouted and I screamed and I didn't even know it was in me to actually be that loud. And I remember the first time they came with, they said, oh, we don't have buses to take everyone home. Actually, they said they don't have buses until the next day. And I told the guys, I mobilized a couple of people and some really good gentlemen there working with us. And I told them, let's get the buses. Let's see what excuse they have. And we got the buses. And they said, oh, the buses cannot evacuate everyone. And I told them, the only way you're living here is over our dead bodies. And I mean that in the most literal sense. You have to run over us to get out of here without us. And so they managed to get some in the buses. Immediately others were called. And I got connections of so many people, including some of the representatives who were in Ethiopia, the Kenyan embassy. And, they made sure that every single person eventually was evacuated. Unfortunately, some Kenyans were left there for quite a longer period, but gladly all of them arrived safely. It was, I think, a week or some weeks later, we found out, some were still in Sudan and we were not aware of them, but eventually they got out. So I think our government responds quite well to, and we're very aggressive. Yeah.
You came eventually. Are you a part of the people who came through Ethiopia? I heard that there were people who came through Ethiopia.
Yeah, I came through Ethiopia. It was a treacherous journey on the road. I think my journey in Ethiopia was more scary than the war in Sudan. I remember we got to a place, when we crossed the border, the Ethiopian police officers, and this was what was scary, told us, we have a certain group of people here because they have a curfew at 4. From 4, there's no cars allowed on the road. And they said, we have a group of people here who will attack you. They'll find you, they're criminals. They will find you, they will attack you, they will steal from you and kill you, and there's nothing we can do about it. So you guys decide. You either stay in the places we'll tell you to and you have to pay for it, or stay out here and those people can do whatever they choose to you. And we went to some of those places. They're like sort of hotels, or I don't know what I'd call them. But goodness, they were in such pathetic state. And I think I said it in my head, and I think everyone also was saying it in their heads, because we just left and were like, I'd rather die on the streets. I'm not staying in this place 1 minute longer. I've never seen anything in such miserable state where you can't even, there's no proper place to go to a washroom or to sleep. Just like, no, we'd rather stay outside. And so we stayed. Fortunately for us, no one got harmed. The gentleman would stay out just checking the buses, just walking around, until morning, and that's when we left.
It was a fleet of several buses.
Yeah.
What do you think that whole Sudan situation did to you as Patience?
It showed me that side of me that I didn't know existed. It made me realize I'm not this shy and introverted person as I try to identify with. I'm actually quite courageous. If I didn't go to Sudan, I highly doubt I'd be on this podcast. I highly doubt I'd think I'm the person who would sit, speak, and have people listen to me talking.
Yeah.
Sudan just did quite a lot for me. Made me realize I'm courageous, made me realize being happy is possible. Like that dark hole that I've always been for most of my life is not a place I belong in. And so I fondly remember Sudan. It's a place where I would gladly go back to. Apologies to my family or friends listening to this, but yeah.
But as people would not want you to go back, I'm thinking about those kids you had in class that day. What do you think happened to them?
Oh, I think about them so much, so often. And some of them found me on Instagram. We don't speak, but I just saw friend requests and I thought, oh, that's good. At least I know they're alive. One of them unfortunately died, not because of the war, I think because of something else. But it was just really sad. I think about them so much because they were kids who were really thirsty to learn. It was so interesting to teach, just a bunch of kids who are so interested in being better in learning because English wasn't their first language. And so to them, learning about this subject was so interesting. And I hope they are safe wherever they are.
People underestimate what war does, especially to children. And sometimes when you look at war generally, you look at war in South Sudan. I read a book of a guy who had written about his child soldier experience and how he had to be recruited into war and how they ended up using drugs and smoking bangi and doing things that he was doing at 11 years, 9 to 11, because he was recruited when he was 9 and was in that war zone for a couple of years until he made it to Kenya. When you're thinking about war in Gaza, when you're thinking about war in DRC, places like the DRC and Sudan who have lived war throughout their lives. But what do you say is an experience you had over this season that you wish anyone watching us today would know?
Wow, as you've mentioned war, how it affects kids and even just people generally, it really does have a huge impact on you. And again, as I mentioned, I'm one person who, when I go through something traumatic, throw it at the back of my brain, try to act like it never happened. And that's the same thing I did with Sudan. When I came back to Kenya, immediately got a new job. I didn't want to have time to think about it. But then the riots started in Kenya and there would be gunshots and they would trigger these things and I'd find myself having panic attacks or even the fireworks. I would not even sit where there are fireworks. And my friends who left the place with me, I remember we came when it was a bit cold in Kenya and it would rain really heavily. It would be raining and there's thunder and all that. And my friends who were telling me, wow, when it was raining, they would wake up and get scared. Are we in Sudan? And then people would come then down. No, we are back in Kenya. And these were big men with families, like much older men. That's what war does to you. And imagine we are adults. Imagine the kids, what this does to them. Some of them get to a point where they're used to the sound of gunshots, which shouldn't be any normal child's, thing. Like it's not okay to feel like, oh, gunshots are so normal, I can just walk around when they're happening. And to some it creates fear, like it did in us. So that experience really, I see that, and it's made me gotten scared to a point that I don't watch anything going on in Gaza or anywhere else because I still get triggered. And I'm glad I'm alive. I wasn't hurt in the war or anything. Imagine the people who actually get hurt in these wars and all that. And it's, I mean, people might judge the fact that I'm scared of watching what's happening in Gaza because I feel triggered, yet I didn't have it that bad or whatever. But if I'm so traumatized to a point that I'm scared of watching any war happening anywhere, imagine what the kids are feeling.
Yeah.
It's just
But I think the body reacts sometimes when you go through things, and sometimes I call them reflexes. They're reflexes that your body shifts into that your brain really doesn't have so much control. And I think sometimes when you go through extreme situations like that, something you've never foreseen, something you never thought about before, you find yourself in a situation where you react in a particular way that you would not consider normal. But now, I don't find it strange that it would trigger you now, because in fact, when you're talking about that experience, my concern was, is it going to now show up later? Is it going to show up in your quiet moments when you're sitting, when you're reading a book, and is it going to be triggered later? But now, to you who lived through that experience, and we thank God you made it successfully to Kenya, recently there was an outrage of conversations where I think the opposition or some faction of that Sudanese war conversation, I think it's one of the parties, the people who are in the opposition,
Yeah.
I think recently came to Kenya and they were welcomed and they signed a pact. And I saw a lot of people who were very angry at the fact that Kenya allowed that to happen. But to you who's lived in South Sudan, or to you who lived in Sudan, in Khartoum, who went through that war, what would you say? First of all, what is your reaction to that?
Now, I think I mentioned initially, me and politics don't go well together, but I saw that, and it's one of the few political things that triggered me. I saw it, and one of my friends, I forwarded it to one of my friends who we were with in Sudan, and he said, "We left these people in their country, and now they are following us." And I felt scared. Honestly, when I saw that, I felt scared. And when I read, I think there was something that the Sudan government must have said about it, and they said, you are allowing people they are criminals. They've been responsible for so many deaths and all that in your country. Like, that in itself is wrong. And I got scared. I thought, what if this just creates a whole new Sudan? Because I've seen the extent to which these people can go. And then these are the very people that are being invited into our country. What's this going to what is it going to do to us, And I remember when we were leaving Sudan, those people were waving goodbye to us, actually saying, "Oh, brothers from friendly countries." There's something they call us friendly countries or something of that sort. They said, "Yeah, go home safely back to your countries because we are going to turn this into a playground of blood." I mean, people who, it gets up their adrenaline to think about shooting and killing. These are the people who are now being welcomed in my country. What does that mean for us? Honestly, that it scared me. When I saw that news and I kept following it for a couple of days, then I decided, let me not do this to my mental health.
Yeah.
I'll just stop. But it scared me. It still does. At the back of my head, I still wonder what that means for us. Yeah.
I don't know what your take is if you're following this conversation. Today we are seated with Patience. Patience, what's your second name? That Ashianze.
Ashianze. Now that's interesting. That actually name is quite interesting. Again,
Yes.
my father, who will come up a lot. Both names, Patience Ashianze, my father apparently wrote them on a piece of paper before I was born. And I was born premature, which is, I find it quite strange and unbelievable. But I was born premature. And my mother had so many false alarms, and she'd go to hospital and told, go back home. It's not time yet. Go back home. She was sent, I think, several times. And eventually she came back. Still, it wasn't time yet. But she was like, no, this one's here. This one's here. And so My father said it's going to be a girl. My mother highly thought it would be a boy. I don't know why. Not because she wants boy children. I don't think she ever wanted a boy, according to her. But she just assumed it might be a boy. But my father was like, this one's a girl and this is going to be her name. So Patience, because I was impatient. That's my father's idea of a joke. This one that, could not wait to come into the world is the one I'm going to name Patience. And Ashianze, his name is Richard Ashioya, and my mother is Anzela. So he took Ashioya, Ashi from Ashioya, and Anze from Anzela, combined it and called me Ashianze. So I'm the only daughter actually who has a combination of those two names. So again, there plays my father's creativity.
Your dad should be recording albums. He's an artist.
He's an interesting guy.
Yeah.
So that's how the name came about, Patience Ashianze.
Yeah, gentlemen and ladies, we are seated today with Patience Ashianze, a teacher by profession, a book lover, a book enthusiast who's found solace in books. And what are you hearing about this conversation today, and especially with that whole Sudan experience? What comes to your mind when you hear that? And sometimes I think a lot of us, personally, I think I couldn't say much because my knowledge on the war in Sudan is a bit limited, and I knew there was something with the Sudan Rapid RSF and something, but I wouldn't say I really understood the depth of why those factions were fighting. But I don't know what your take is. And if you hear this and when you hear Patience experience, what comes to your mind? And sometimes as a country, we speak about war. And I always feel like sometimes Kenyans quote war, but we really don't know what it means to be in a war situation. And sometimes I feel like these experiences that some of us have, like what you come back home with, is a good opportunity for us to get a glimpse and a window of opportunity to see what that would look like, and really ask ourselves, do we really want to go that road? But tell us what you think on the comment section. Today, we are seated here at the Kenya National Library Service headquarters in Upper Hill, Maktaba Kuu, and Kenya National Library Service have a long partnership with us, and they are going to contribute books to that initiative. As we shared last week, we are in the process of raising or putting together a modern library facility for Kakelo Secondary School. Remember last week's episode, we spoke about Kakelo Secondary School. That school in Homa Bay that didn't have a library, they had a small bookstore that was serving as the school library. And what's on your shelf, together with our entire communities, we've picked it up, and we are going to ensure that Kakelo Secondary School has a library. And Kenya National Library Service have been gracious enough, and they've asked us to put forth a request, and sure enough, that is going to be given. Kenya National Library Service is going to donate books to Kakelo Secondary Schools. So we're halfway there. The journey has already begun. But you who is watching us today, how do you think you can join hands with us to ensure that that facility is completed? There's still so much that needs to be done. We still need to get furniture into that place. We still need to get shelves. We still need to get more books, because there are academic and non-academic books. So today we are privileged to sit here with Patience, a wealth of knowledge, by the way. And Patience, now we want to quickly scan through your shelf and take us through a quick journey as we did earlier. And I'd want to hear, what do we have here?
Well, here we have basically books I've read and some that I haven't. For instance, there's this one, And the Mountains Echoed by Khalid Hosseini. I've read The Kite Runner and A Thousand Splendid Suns. This isn't my favorite, but I loved A Thousand Splendid Suns and The Kite Runner. After reading them, my view about, and you'll hear most Kenyans say things like, oh, mimi ni Taliban, and I even remember one person who signed this book for me at the back told me to stay Taliban. And we use that word, so randomly. But after reading these books, I remember getting so triggered every time I'd hear someone say Taliban, because seeing what the Talibans did to these people, and the book being told from the perspective, I'm talking about The Kite Runner and A Thousand Splendid Suns here. What the Talibans did was, it's something that lives with you. And the way Hosseini writes, you would not forget his books. This And the Mountains Echoed is quite okay too, but not exactly my favorite. I feel like he didn't do himself justice in this one.
Okay.
Yeah. Here, the classic To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah.
Yeah, so To Kill a Mockingbird, most people have heard of this one. I think I've mentioned to you before, most of my library was classics because, again, I would discuss books with my father. And whatever he'd recommend would always be classics because during his time, those are what he read, and a couple of Kenyan authors. So this, I loved it. It talks about uh, let's just call them Black Americans, I guess, and how the injustice prevails there and all of that, which reminds me of this as well, The Hate You Give. Although this one talked about from the perspective of a teenager, again, the struggles they go through, the unfair treatment towards Black people, and how, the white people can easily get away with all this treatment. And I remember doing African American literature at university, and I would get so triggered, and I had this sort of, for lack of a better word, hatred against white people and how they were doing this to Black people. But then now, I don't hate them, but just this sort of books sort of make me happy, just not happy. No, the content doesn't make me happy, but I love reading them because it keeps educating me about all these struggles and what our part is also in that as Kenyans.
Yeah. But I want to go into this one a little bit.
Yeah.
The Hate You Give. Tell us about The Hate You Give. What holds the spine of this book?
Now, this book, if you read even just the first few pages, it will introduce you to a character who is unjustly killed just because of the way he looks. And we see this quite a lot in movies. You see a Black guy walking down a dark alley. A police officer will see him and think, oh, he's a criminal. And to make it worse, if they wear a hoodie, oh, this is automatically a criminal. And they'd probably just prosecute you because of that. It's the same thing that happens with men who have rastas in Kenya. You walk down the streets and they're like, "Uyu ako na bangi." It's a profile they already put on you. And it's the same thing that's happening to this kid here. Just because he is Black, they automatically assume, oh, this is a criminal. And he's short. I don't want to spoil it for those who maybe might want to read. Just because of his skin color, just because your skin color automatically classifies you as a criminal. And so it's the voice of this young girl just taking us through that because that was one of her best friends. And some of her best friends killed as children, because most of the time we see adults getting killed, the Blacks, like in To Kill a Mockingbird. But here we have a teenager unjustly accused and killed because in a way he was a threat to the police officers. An unharmed teenager is a threat, and then you end up killing him. So it's quite sad, but I'd recommend anyone to read that book, actually. Yeah.
Hate is a very strong word.
Yeah.
What do you think the title, The Hate You Give, seeks to bring out?
Now, it's very interesting, actually, what it brings out. And usually, it's just that we are on camera, but I'm usually quite good with finding the places I want in. Oh, I did. I'm actually good. So on page 17, the writer explains it's one of the songs by Tupac. And Tupac said, Thug Life stands for the hate you give. So Thug Life, the THUG, the hate you give little infants. And they use the F word, F's everybody. And so, in a way, Tupac is talking about how this hate that you give these kids while they were young is what turns them into who they become as adults, and probably end up, wreaking havoc in society because you hated them as children, showed them that you guys, because of your skin color, you don't deserve a certain type of life, or, you are criminals just because of your skin color. And when they grow through this environment where they are hated, they end up not being in society, they end up also showing that hate to others. So it's talking just about that hatred that you give little infants. It's going to hurt everyone else that they come across.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you relate this back here at home? We have instances where we are almost doing similar.
Yeah. And that reminds me of a book that a friend has borrowed, which would have been here, Nairobi by Empress Shiku. And in her book, the hate that these kids were given, and she talks about the background of these children and what they become as adults, a bunch of criminals, but the sort of criminals that you'd feel sorry for, the sort of criminals you don't want to get caught, because you see how the hatred they were given, the pain inflicted on them as children, is what turned them into who they become. And so it's something that we see quite a lot, even in our country. How children are treated when they are young, that's going to reflect very much in who they become as adults. And so many criminals are criminals because of what they went through. The racial aspect of it, even in our country, you see people, being more inclined, especially people from your community, they'll be like, oh, nataka yellow, yellow. They make it look like this dark skin tone, there's something utterly wrong with it. And women now will try and lighten their skin. And I think this lady, Joanne, talks about it, how you pass the streets of Nairobi and they're trying to sell you something to make you lighter. And what these women will tell you is, later tukupea kukufanya ukue msupu, like we want to make you look beautiful because your skin tone apparently is not good enough. You need to be lighter skinned to be accepted. So even though this is about the American society, even in our culture, there's that sort of thing strongly ingrained in people's mind that the lighter you are, the more beautiful you are. And so we have a bunch of women, quite unfortunately, struggling to be lighter. But again, still, we have a lot of women who are proud of their dark skin and feel like, yeah, we are beautiful. And it's not a feeling. They actually are really stunning, beautiful women who are black.
Over this season, we are in this season where we just marked the International Women's Day. And actually, this year, 2025, we are 30 years from the Beijing conference. And people are trying to look back at the inclusivity that has happened in this whole gender conversation. And something, most of the time when people talk about gender, I don't know why most of the time people think about women. Gender and women are always almost synonymous. But I want to come to Patience. And Patience has brought us here. Do you think that even as we talk about inclusivity, even as we talk about opening up these spaces for women and allowing women to be, there are instances where self-sabotage prevents us from achieving that?
Yeah, I think that happens. And oh my God, don't get me in the wrong path with the feminists. But yeah, when it comes to gender, as you said, you hear gender, you think women. And I don't subscribe to the idea that men and women are equal. I believe in equity. I don't believe in, the rest of, and I remember this one joke I read, someone said, okay, if you believe what a man can do, a woman can do better, take your shirt off na uende usukume mkokoteni basi as a woman. Would you do that? But men can do that. It was a joke, but regardless, it brings out the perspective that yes, we need to be provided with, equal opportunities and all that fairness. But men and women, we are very different, even in our biological setup. There's no way we can do the same things all the time. And this competition of trying to, be like men, it just doesn't work. That, again, brings in that self-sabotage because I don't want to be like a man. I want to be like me and be accepted as me. And that doesn't make a man now way better. But it's just, I'm a woman, I'm different from a man, but give me equal, don't discriminate me because I'm a woman. At the end of the day, both of us are human beings. And sometimes we end up shooting ourselves by the things we try to fight for our rights to a point that we are working against ourselves than for ourselves. As Joan mentions in her book, she talks about something, the one I've talked about, where women, they pay their own bills and they feel, oh, now I'm an independent woman and, I don't need a man and all that, which is okay. But paying your bills makes you an adult, just as a man who's paying his bills. So don't sit there waiting for, oh, a man will come and do this for me and do that for me. No, you as a woman, you're also required to work hard. You need to, your worth shouldn't be in being beautiful and getting all these rich men to do things for you. Work for yourself as well. Don't just sit there and want princess treatment and expect men should sweep you off your feet and then out there you're fighting for, feminists. And probably a feminist out there will hear me and say the worst things. Should I apologize? Probably not.
Not necessarily, because I think I feel like it's a conversation that is worth having. Because while we would want to, I am a pro equal opportunities for everyone, regardless of their gender, race, color, skin color, or what.
Yeah.
And most of the time we are stuck there, where you wonder if it's the society or it's me. But now coming to Patience, do you think there are instances you've come across in life where being a woman has disadvantaged you?
I'd need to think hard about that. Probably. Can I think of an instance at the top of my head now? I feel like even, in workplaces sometimes, but I'm fortunate enough to have worked with people who've seen my potential and have been given, a lot of leadership opportunities, most of which, actually all of which I never wanted because I've never seen myself as a leader. And they'd be like, no, Patience, you've got the potential, we need to see you doing this thing.
Yeah.
I'd be given opportunities that I didn't even want because they saw you're doing way better than most of these people. And the men would get really, triggered and hurt by that. How can she be given this when we are here? Like, why her? So there was always that debate of a woman does not deserve this. This should have been a man's opportunity. Yeah.
All right. Patience, I can't live without talking about a book. I met Patience at a book reading, and I want to hear your thoughts on Rough Silk. Patience, tell us about Rough Silk.
Now, Rough Silk, I've just recently finished, and it's a book that I've loved, to be honest. And one of the reasons I loved it, because my father and I, for years, have been talking about the idea of writing a book together, not the way she did, but the two of us. So with two perspectives, but starting with his story and my side of the story, so people know how I am because he is. And the two of us are very good procrastinators. We'll keep talking about something and never actually get it done for years. And when I read this book, I saw, wow, this is nearly like my father's and I's dream coming to life through someone else. And I even got him a copy signed by the author, who was very excited to want to hear his view. This morning, actually, before I came, I spoke to him about it. And he told me I read the first chapter and I put it down. And at the book reading you had, there were so many people who said that they read the first chapter, felt the tragedy of it, and they were like, this is deep. I need to put it down and come back to it later, which was the opposite for me. I read the first chapter and I felt the same way as they did. This is tragic, it's deep, and I'm not putting it down. Because you give me a tragic story, you're drawing me in. I love tragedies. Okay, I don't want them to happen to me, but I love reading about them. But yeah, so I really, really love the way she writes. One of the things that stands out for me is how she's very authentic. You can see how authentically Kenyan she is, Luo. And, she writes, there are some places where she writes in Luo. She doesn't bother to translate it, which makes me want to learn Luo even more. I'd go to my Luo friends and ask them, what's this word? What does this sentence mean? And all that. And I have quite strong roots from the Luo land. My other name is Adhiambo, which my grandmother very proudly named me that as the first grandchild to be named that name. And I've never wanted to learn the Luo language. If I say this, the Luos will come at me.
No. You've come around. It's okay.
Yeah, you guys will throw stones at me. I can't
Actually,
have that.
Those Luos have no right to do that. There is a Luo sitting with you and he's talking to you. But just to get to understand, because I feel like most of the time we've really polarized the tribes, that most of the time we've made the tribes look like they're such bad things.
Yeah.
And I feel like Patience should not be shy to really speak about what she felt or what she experienced when she was reading this book. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for that. Now, Rough Silk has done what I never thought would happen in years for me. After I finished, I remember telling one of my Luo friends, I actually feel like it's maybe too late to learn Luo, but maybe I should. It's quite sad that I've lived nearly half of my life in Kisumu, and I intentionally did not learn the language. I'm very good with languages, by the way. I would easily have learned it. But I will not use the word hate, but I disliked the people and the language because of instances of things that happened, my experience with the Luo people. I just did. I would walk down the streets, even in Nairobi these days, and I would hear people speaking Luo, and in my head I'm like, God, there's too many of them in this country. And apologies to them. But after reading this book, honestly, I don't think I would have that thought again. I don't think
What is it that this book did? What is that thing that the book did?
the authenticity of it. And that's why you remember even at her reading, I mentioned that there were only two parts that I feel that authenticity was being taken away when she wrote the money in dollars instead of cash at some point. And it sounded like a really dumb thing to say, but that authenticity is what sold me there. When she was writing the Luo phrases, she would not bother translating that. She was authentically, courageously identifying as a Luo person in her writing without even, having to shout it out. You would just feel this is someone who's proud of being Kenyan, proud of being Luo. And I felt, wow, I want that for me. I want to identify with my tribe and carry that with pride. And the very reason I disliked Luos is the same reason I ended up wanting to find out more about the Luo culture because of this book. That pride and arrogance, I hated it more than anything in them. And she carries that pride in the book, the way she doesn't say it, but you can feel it throughout the book. And I realized Luos are one of the few tribes in Kenya that, when you go to Kisumu right now, they'll speak to you in Luo. They don't care what tribe you are. Jaber nango. They just assume you will understand. They have that assumption. How can you not understand our language? And I love that about them, that they will even walk in the streets of the US and these people will proudly identify as Luos. They will not try to, change their accent. Or you can hear when a Luo speaks English, most of the time you can tell. And they do it so proudly. They are so proud of their culture. They teach their kids their language. I sadly do not know Luya. I understand it. I've tried speaking it and people would tell me, no, you're ruining the language. Don't, because I speak with a very strong Swahili accent when I speak Luya. And it's quite sad that as a Luya, I can't even speak my own language. But show me, take 10 Luos here. Probably just one of them will not speak their language. The rest of them, even the Gen Zs, they know that language. And seeing someone carry that with so much pride, it just warms my heart. Allow me to just briefly touch on this. I'm Wanga, and I very proudly identify as a descendant of Nabongo Mumia. And this I've worn with so much pride. But the Luo side of me, my grandmother always took so much pride in me being at the Ambo, and she would dance in the homestead at the Ambo, and every time I arrive, and I always hid from that identity, and I feel like I did injustice to her and to myself. Why do I run away from those fruits but embrace this ones so much? And so Rough Silk is that book that's made me, and to all of my Luo friends out there and anyone watching this that's Luo, I love them. I in fact, I want to go try and listen to more Luo music just because of this book. I will proudly identify as a Diambo just because of this book, just because Tendo courageously, authentically talks about culture in a way that makes me fall in love with it.
Yeah.
So I love that book. I think it's one of the highlights of my year.
Already?
Yeah.
Wow. That is big to say that in March. But now when you're looking at the book itself, and there's the cultural aspect, but what is one or two of those things you can say were eye-opening moments when you were reading the book?
The things that I read there that I really, there were things that I would not naturally gravitate towards. Like I love how as a woman, she's so knowledgeable about politics and football and, all these things that I never even bothered about. I love how she talks about all of that. The HIV and AIDS and how it killed so many Kenyans at that time. I never was aware of, that people died in such large masses just because of HIV. There's so many things that happened, in the years before I was born that she makes it, she writes in a way that I see, and in a very simple way, as opposed to if I took a book about Kenyan culture and read it, I would probably be bored. But in the way she writes, I feel like I'm getting so much knowledge about my country and my people in the past years that I really wasn't aware of, or I just knew quite briefly about. So that I love very much. And I love her relationship with her father. I'm a daddy's girl. I think at this point, everyone has realized that. And I love one thing about how her father, as any human being, is not a man without flaws. But she describes his flaws so perfectly in a way that I think I would also describe my father. He's a polygamous man. And if you look at him as a man, you might feel like this man, you wouldn't, you'd judge him in a way. But she writes about him in a way that instead of judging him, you fall in love with this man. You feel like, man, I'd want a father like that. And I remember telling my father one time when I was a teenager, with his polygamy and all that, obviously there would be clashes and issues. And one time he was trying to explain to me something, and I told him, Dad, I don't need to understand that story. That's your story. That's about you and your wives. You are a father to me, and as a father, you are a good father. Who you are as a husband, and let your wives worry about. Who you are as a man, and let society worry about. I don't see you as a husband or a man. I see you as a father. And in that, you've done a good job. So just let me see you as my father, and let everyone else judge the rest of it. And I feel like Tendo would say the same thing as I did. The way she writes about her father, even with his flaws, you would love that man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now when you're looking at this whole setup, and I'm sure being a friend of your mom's, time and again, this question has come. You've looked at the husband through, most girls look at the potential husband through the eyes of the mother. But what would you say when, in relation to your perspective on marriage or getting a husband, looking at what your mom has brought to you, how would you react to the situation of where that husband-wife relationship is, what your take is on polygamy, and now you are the gate?
Now, my parents' relationship, and my mother is the legal wife, the only one that, they signed documents and all that. But, in the Luya culture, it doesn't matter if you sign documents or not, all the rest are all identified as wives. But I've loved that my parents, throughout our growing up, I don't think that we'd say there's an instance where they did something that made us feel like, oh, I don't want marriage for myself. I don't know about my sisters, but for me, I'd say that. And my mother, I don't know her opinion about the polygamy aspect of it. And maybe polygamous husbands do this because even Tendo, when she writes about the mother is, like the favorite of the father, the woman that he was in love with, and the one he talked about even in his later years. And my father is the same. With my mother, I know that is the woman he loves. I see that in his eyes. I see the way he speaks to her. So I'm not sure if he does this with every family he goes to. And so they all assume, oh, my mother is the favorite one. But I'm glad that I grew up in a home where they loved each other. And despite challenges that they faced and all that, they didn't show us that side, So, yeah, with their marriage life, even with the polygamy aspect of it, I feel like they've been quite happy, unless they just hide it well. So.
I hear that question of marriage is brought a lot when a girl turns 30.
Yeah.
I've had you turn 30 sometime soon.
Yeah.
Are they asking you about that question already, and what is your response?
My parents are very interesting people. They actually don't. In fact, my mother, and this is what makes me question, do they hide their happiness? She always says, if you feel like marriage is not for you, I'm never going to force you to get married. In fact, enjoy this freedom, this peace that you have at this time. Just be happy. No one's putting pressure on you. And my father says the same thing. He says like, if you meet someone and you love him, I'm happy about that. If you're happy being single, I'm happy about that. And he has this place where he built like a guest house outside. And so recently when I went home in December, he was talking to my sisters and he said, when you meet someone, regardless of who he is, how old he is, as long as you love him, I will not dispute. Then he said, one of my daughters, you guys might meet someone who's on a wheelchair, so I want to make rails where we can easily push. My father's sense of humor is not the best, honestly, but yeah. So I was like, yeah. So you meet whoever you want. Don't feel scared of coming to tell me this is the man I love. If you meet a 70-year-old man and you feel like this is it for me, well and good. Just be happy. I just want my daughters to be happy. Yeah. So yeah, they never questioned me about my being single, which I'm quite happy about actually. It's something people feel like, single people say that but at night they cry themselves to sleep. Every time I'm sad and I remember, oh my goodness, I'm single and I don't have to worry about, forgetting to call someone, or I have to wash clothes, or I have to, take care of a child. I'm happy. Like,
Yeah. They are watching you. They've heard you, what you're saying. And
they should not attack me though.
I don't think they'll attack you. They'll just approach you with kind words. Kill me quick, Meja Mwangi.
Yeah. Now, Meja Mwangi is an author that my friend Lexa Lubanga, who's also, she really wants people to read a lot of Kenyan literature. She is always on YouTube, and she was on the papers recently, actually, about the Women's Day. She's one of the biggest advocates of Meja Mwangi. My father also loves Meja Mwangi. That's what got me to buying that book. And I really loved it. I read it, some years back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I loved how Meja writes. This reminds me again of Empress Shiko's Nairobi. The way she writes, it's like you can tell this is someone who's read Meja Mwangi before. Yeah, he's one of the writers that I'd recommend. I'm planning to read some of his other books for the Kenyan Readathon this month, hopefully. So, yeah. If anyone has recommendations for more Kenyan authors, I'm happy to have them.
Patience, you have so much that I would still want to talk about, but I'm sure we are clearly running out of time. But one of the things I find a bit strange, looking at the touch of books you have, is Harry Potter. There is a Harry Potter on your shelf. Tell us about this one. How did Harry Potter make it here?
Now, Harry Potter, again, those who want to throw stones, because, some people have very controversial opinions about Harry Potter. I was always one of those people. And I felt like, Harry Potter is not for me. I would never, why would I read this? And then my students challenged me to read Harry Potter. And that was, I think, 3 years ago. And I decided to start with the first book.
Yeah.
And goodness, it made me feel like a teenager again. And I love how J.K. Rowling writes. I love her language, the way, you would see the story. And I think, again, a very good friend of mine that I should have mentioned by now, he is in the UK. We met in Kenya. There were a group of, just young people from the UK who came to Kenya to help schools in the village, and they stayed over at our place, and that's how we became friends. These guys were so disciplined in reading that, sometimes my father would come, turn on the TV, put it on BBC, because they're like, the British would want to watch BBC. And if it was their reading time, you just see all of them in their books. No one looks at the TV. And so we were like, okay, these guys, they had, they had specific times to read and all that. So one of them, James, so very kindly, when I told him I'm reading Harry Potter, he sent the whole set from the UK for me, because it was cheaper to get it from there. And occasionally he sends me quite a lot of books. So Harry Potter, when I read, I remember there were days I would stay up all night, because when you get to the third book, they get thicker and thicker. It's really huge books. And I'd stay up all night just reading. And I remember some characters would die and I cried. I don't cry over books, to be honest. I'm not saying that to act like, oh, I'm strong and I don't cry. No, I just don't cry over books. But I cried over Harry Potter. Quite surprising for me. But one of the key things I got from Harry Potter is about love and death. They're the two things that as human beings we have no power over. Yeah, that's all I can say about Harry Potter. And I will always recommend that in a lifetime you should at least read Harry Potter.
All right. The first recommendation. But you're part of several book reading communities. Tell us about that as we journey towards the end.
Yeah, I'm in a book club with the people I work with. And it's a community that I love so much. It's all these women that have read very widely. Their engagement with books is quite interesting, very different perspective from mine sometimes, but I really love learning from them. We read a book, Island of Sea Women, which is not on this shelf, but again, it's a book I'd recommend because it talks about the Korean, I'm not sure how to pronounce the word, but hainyo, something like that. They are sea divers, women who dive in the sea, and it's sort of a matriarchal society, which is very different from what we are used to. The women work, the men take care of the kids, and occasionally they'll come to the sea to give the women the children to breastfeed, and they go back taking care of the kids. A very interesting society, a book I'd recommend to anyone. So yeah, I love that book club I am in with the women I work with. I'm on another one, an online one, which was started by Betty Kilonzo. So yeah, we've been reading Books, very interesting books. This time we're reading the Let Them Theory, a non-fiction one. Last month we read The Death of Vivek, which triggered me in ways I do not want to talk about. But yeah. And then I'm in another one with just a group of friends where this was our first read, Anxious People. So yeah, I love these communities. I love being able to talk about books. I love spaces where it's just books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But how would you say these different book communities shape how you experience books?
It's interesting to hear people's perspective on books because when you read it, I think it's a quote I read somewhere, but no two people read the same book. Even if I gave you this to read, we're not reading the same book. Whatever we come out of the book with, both of us would be very different. And so I love when I read a book to hear someone else's view about it, to see a different perspective and not just what I know. 'Cause I love learning new things. So whenever I'm with people, I like listening to them more because I know whatever I have in my head, I already know. I want to hear what someone else has got to say. And that's why I really enjoy the book club communities, just to hear everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But would you say, is there any instance you can remember where the conversations in a book club or discussing a certain book also now completely changed your perspective on a certain issue?
Yeah. Quite a lot, actually. Several instances I could mention, but I'll mention the most recent one, that Death of Vivek. Reading that book, my goodness. Hey, I don't even know what to say. The theme going on there, she's an amazing writer, that I'll give her. I love the language, but I hated the theme so much. But there was someone else in the book club that, looked at it at such a different perspective, made me see that I was overlooking everything else just because of a sort of prejudice I have over the theme that was going on. And that's why I love book clubs, because of such things. Because with the book club, then my prejudices are set aside and I realize there's a different view to this. Yeah.
But now thinking about, you said also earlier that, I think this one you told me as we were trying to catch up, that you barely post on your social media, but you follow a lot of people doing books, content and things like that.
Yeah.
I really wanted to understand that. What would you say you enjoy in seeing what other people do with books and things like that?
I just love seeing, when I go on Instagram and I see book posts, it just gives me a certain type of high. I'm someone who would walk into a bookshop. I'm a book sniffer. I don't know if people like that exist, but I sniff books and it makes me feel happy. There's this Somanami branch in Ngara, which is just close to where I live. And sometimes when I feel really low, I just walk in there, flip through the pages, hear that sound of pages flipping, sniff them, and I feel happy. And it's the same sort of happiness I get when I just scroll and see people, reading books, recommending books. There's this one particular lady, she is a friend of a friend, and she started a bookshop in Nanyuki called Books and Bloom. And I'd love people to check that out because I love what she's done with that space. And she's just an ordinary girl who loves reading, but the content she posts, sometimes I just get myself going on her page and just scrolling through. And I'm actually planning to go to Nanyuki soon just to be in that space. So it just makes me happy to see people loving books, reading books. Yeah.
But if Patience was to build a bookish community or space, what would that look like?
Wow. Now I have thought about, having a bookish community, a space, and I've even told my friends some of my ideas.
Yeah.
And I have this picture of a library, and it sounds like something out of a Harry Potter book, so I won't even say what it looks like. But trust me, it's massive and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I just want a space where people can sit, and I've always I've always envisioned pulling an all-nighters reading books. I don't like how conversations with books are always cut. Like even now, we have to hurry because time and all that. I just want a limited time to sit with people and talk about books all night and read all night. So that's one of my dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Patience. It's been awesome to have you on the show today.
Thank you.
And what have you thought about Patience? What do you think about her perspectives? Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. If there is a particular part of this that you enjoy, that you agree with, tell us on the comment section. But also, if there is something you don't agree with, let us know. We'll also be glad to share that with Patience. But Patience now is part of our community, and be sure that whatever questions you have for her, we will look for her and she will be open to responding to that. Isn't that so, Patience?
Yeah, thank
All
you
right?
so much for having me.
So as we conclude, there is a segment now on this podcast where our previous guest recommends a book to our guest today. So last week we had on the show Atieno Ochi, an amazing lady, and she spoke extensively about After 4:30, which is the book she recommended to our guest today. And I don't know, have you heard about After 4:30? Have you read about it before?
I've heard about it. In fact, very recently on Instagram, I was going over, I think, Kitabu's social media, and they were talking about Mailu, and I wanted to. Actually, it's one of the books I want to get. I haven't read it, but I really would love to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But from what you've heard, what makes you want to read it?
Just because it's David Mailu. Honestly, I don't think I have any other reason other than that, because as I mentioned, I'm trying to read more Kenyans, and I feel like, these Kenyans that have been there longer, I just want to read the classics. I want to read the older people. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Then we'll be looking forward to hearing your take, and once that has happened, once you've read it. But also now it presents an opportunity for you to recommend a book to our next guest.
Okay. They'll probably guess what I'm going to recommend. Rough Silk. Yeah, that is my recommendation. This book, I want everyone to read. I would love for everyone to just read that book.
What is that thing that I should tell this person when I sit with them why they need to get Rough Silk?
The authenticity, as I talked about. If you want to read someone who loves who she is and what she is, and we've met her, I think that's the place where you and I met.
Yeah.
You can see she embodies that, the confidence, the courage, like she is unapologetically Kenyan, Luo, author, like just read her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Patience. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Patience Ashianze, who's been our guest for today's edition of What's on Your Shelf. Thank you so much for being on the show today. And to you also, thank you so much for journeying with us to the very end. What a conversation it has been. We didn't know that how much time has already lapsed. Time has just flown by, and it's because of such an amazing conversation we've had today. But what has been your thought on this episode of What's on Your Shelf? What do you think about the conversations we've had today? Feel free to share with us your thoughts and your feedback on the comment section. But also, if you do love this video, please share it with friends and family, and continue being part of our community. We are glad that What's on Your Shelf community has continuously been growing over the past 1 year. And this community is starting to step out. And that's why we have picked up a project at Cello Secondary School, where we are desiring to put up a library facility, a state-of-art library facility that will enable the students in that school. And we've heard also of the neighboring schools to be able to interact with books and acquire knowledge. But for today's episode, thank you so much. And this has been brought to you in partnership with the Kenya National Library Service, where we are seated today. Please check them out. They offer a wide range of services. Look at knls.ac.ke and you'll see so much that happens in this place. And they have an amazing kids section. And check it out. It's one of my favorite places in this library. And this also has been brought to you in partnership with Nuria Bookstore, who are the leading online bookstore in Kenya for 4 years in a row today. And they've been gracious enough. Some of the authors we've had an opportunity to speak with. That book that Patience has recommended, Rough Silk, I met Patience and the author, Auko Tendo, at Nuria Bookstore, where they oftenly have book conversation and book reading conversations. Please check them out at nuria.com for any book that you want. They are the home of African books, but that does not mean that they don't have international bestsellers. So you'll see them all on that website. But visit their physical location at the first floor of the Baza Plaza in Nairobi CBD and explore and experience. From me and the team, we are really grateful. And I want to conclude by asking you one question. Have you subscribed yet? Have you liked? Have you shared? Because this is what gets us out there to allow us to continue having these interactive conversations as far as literature has taken us. Thank you so much for joining with me. I've been your host, Mulure Mike, and on behalf of the team that has put this together, thank you so much and see you on the next one.